Hey everyone, just going to do a carburetor job on my Yamaha Bravo 250. I believe this is a 1984 model year. I'd have to really check the registration again to make sure, but it isn't around that year. And they're all essentially the same. So essentially, we're going to get in there and pull that carburetor out and tune it up. Just make sure it's clean for the season. So I'm just going to go through the steps as we do it. So what I normally do is, first thing I do is I remove the choke cable, which is this cable screw here, and you're going to use a 14 mil metric wrench, and you're going to undo it off of there. So if I happen to, I'm doing this by myself here, so if I happen to pan out or see shots of my messy garage, sorry. Once you loosen it off with a 14 mil wrench, just finishing unscrewing it. Once it's unscrewed, just pull it out, and that's what it looks like there. So there is no adjustment on this, so it's basically just set it up out of the way, make sure it's gone back out of the way. And then what I like to do is, your throttle cable is here, and as you can see, I have just a little bit of throttle movement in there. So you don't want it so it's pulling up on the carb all the time. You want to make sure you have a little bit of throttle play in there, and that's adjusted with this nut here, which is a 10 mil. So I just crack it loose and finish pulling it off. But first what we have to do is we have to release the cable. So the cable just pulls up. Hold this. My son Carson helped me. Just let go. Let go now. And I just need to get in here and hold this so that you just undo this little tab off of there, and then basically just finish unscrewing this. So the reason I pointed out the throttle play is in case that nut moves while you're unscrewing this, but you need to remove this in order to get the carb out. And then again, just slide it off to the side. So essentially those are the two choke lever and throttle lever that you have to undo. And then you have your oil pump lever here. So again, it's tied onto the carb here. And again, you're going to take your 10 mil and just crack it loose. And then the same thing again. You're just going to unscrew it. Once it's out, again, you can just slide it off to the side. Okay, so again, that's your oil pump. So now it's removed. So essentially the last thing we need to do here, two things actually. We need to unhook the oil lever, or the oil cable right there, and this Phillips screwdriver head here. So I'm just going to go ahead . So once I've got that undone, I usually like undoing both of them. It'll make going back on easier, and also you can take the coupler between the carb and the engine and make sure when you take it off that it's in good shape. There's no cracks, not allowing any extra air to get in. So and then this oil lever here, it's got a little tab on it there. I just usually try and just push it off. Sorry if the lights poor here, everyone, but it's up here with my camera. And then once that oil line is slid off there, as you can see, the carburetor, everything is loose on it. Okay, I had to use 2 hands to pop it off. As you'll see now, we have easy access to get the fuel line off. And mine's got a wire clip on there. And it's kind of tucked underneath. So once you remove the carburetor, you have to make sure where your fuel tank level is on fuel might spill out. So I just use a bolt, plug it into the end of the line, and then I just try to hold it up so that it's not leaking. And as you can see, there's removed carb. Looks a little dirty. We're going to put it on the bench and tear it apart now. So I have this bucket I keep outside that I just use random rags and throw it in. And one thing I got to make sure is there is going to be some fuel come out of the carb. So just make sure you've got somewhere safe to dump all the fuel when you pull it off. And then once you have the carb, put it on somewhere clean surface so that you can get at it and see. And I'm going to get my son Carrison. He's going to come over here and operate the camera and watch what I'm doing. So you've got all these Phillips screwdriver heads. You want to just make sure you pop them all off. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter which hole they go into. And they're a Phillips head on mine, so I imagine they're a Phillips head on... Well, I know they are a Phillips head on the other ones I've taken apart as well, so... I always just put a piece of cardboard down on the table and then make sure I do it all, pull it off. So once you pull this off, just pull it straight off. You'll see there's no ring in the bottom there that you want to make sure that it's not damaged, because you're going to reuse that. This bowl has got a nut on the bottom. It's basically a drain. I leave my sleds full of fuel all summer long, so that's the way I do it. Other people I know like to drain them. So once you have that bowl out, you want to take off this little screw here, and this screw holds the float and the needle and seat all in, so you got to be careful. So once you pull the screw out, the float, it's got a little pin that holds it so it can come out, and then the needle and seat. So there's the needle there, this little black end piece, and it's going to go into the seat, the pressed in seat. So once you get that out, you can take a look. This carb's pretty clean on the inside looking. It's not all gummed up and green. You've got 2 jets here that we're going to remove. So we're going to use a 6 metric to pull this jet out. And this is your primary jet. So there's numbers wrote on here, which will tell you what size they are. And with my poor sight, I need glasses on to take a look at it, but I'll just set it there. And the other one, it's a flathead screwdriver. So you got to take a look inside, make sure you get a good screwdriver on it, and again, unscrew it off. So there's your secondary jet, your idle jet essentially. And again, there's a number on it which tells you what size jet it is, which I need my magnifying glass. So once you got that stuff set to the side, you can pull off these hoses, the vent hoses. Set them off to the side. And now we've got adjustment screw here for our idle. What I generally do, make sure I know which way the carb is facing, and I'll start and I'll count and I'll turn it all the way in until it's snug. So there's half, 1, yeah, not quite 1.5. So I would say that's 1 1/4 turns from bottom out. And then I can just fully remove that so that I can make sure that that gets all cleaned up inside there. So again, 1 1/4 turn out. And I always just take a marker and mark how many turns that is just on the side of my paper here so that I've got a reference coming back to it. So essentially, you don't want to mess with this. That's essentially your idle. And again, our oil pump lever was in here, our cable end was in here, and our throttle end cable was in here. And you can see the throttle end moves that butterfly. Okay, and when that throttle moves, it activates the oil pump cable, which allows oil to come in. So that essentially is all you can remove off this carb. You could pull this out, disassemble all this, but it's a lot of extra work that doesn't need to be done. So from there, what I do, I just take it, drop it in my little basket into my carb cleaner and my parts cleaner here, some gunk parts cleaner, and I just take it and I take everything and I throw it in. I throw the jets in there. I throw the screws all in there. And then I take the, make sure I take this gasket without wrecking it. I just pull this rubber gasket out. And again, just set it to the side. And then you've got your bowl loose there that can go in as well. So you can pop this off. It's a 17 wrench to do that, metric wrench to do that. You screw it off, and again, there's a rubber washer in the bottom here that you don't want to throw inside the carb cleaner. So there's the rubber washer for the gasket there. So again, this all can go inside. And I just take the whole thing, and this doesn't have enough that I need to worry about it with wrecking any of the plastic pieces that are on the end there for the fuel. And I'm just gonna let it soak for a few hours. And then we'll come back and we'll do a video of reassembling. So I always make sure I put the cap back on, and the container that I've dumped some fuel into, I'm going to throw that back outside so that it's not sitting in my garage and can cause a fire. So I've left it for a couple hours sitting in the carb cleaner, and now I'll just pull it out and let it drain itself out. And then what I do now, I just spray it all down with some choke and carb clean to clean out the carb cleaner on it. And then I'll also blow it all out with compressed air to dry it all off after. But the carb parts cleaner in that little bucket is a little greasy, oily, and carb cleaner will clean that up. And then when the compressed air to put all the orifices and make sure they're all cleaned out, it'll help dry out the carb. So once I get that done, I'll be back. Hey everybody, I've finished cleaning this off with brake clean after I had it in the parts tub, and got everything cleaned up, dried off, and just ready for assembly again. So I want to make sure that I put this gasket back on and that I put it on properly. You look, there's little dog legs that have to go in specific spots. So again, I'm reusing the seals. It wasn't that long ago that I had changed this whole carb kit, so I feel comfortable that these seals are going to work. If I notice any fuel leaking, then I'll fix it up. But again, washer back in there, and don't over tighten this. It's just got to be snug. You don't want to break it. It's just white metal. Once that's back in there, I did check my main jet is a 105. You can change that jet for different elevations to get better performance, and idle jet is a 78, and I believe 78 is pretty well standard. It's just the main jet you got to change. So again, flat screwdriver, put that main jet in, or pardon me, the idle jet, and just a this is number 6. And again, I'm just snugging them down. I'm not overly tightening them so that I don't strip them or wreck anything off. The next thing I want to do is put my float back in with the needle. And again, this seat is pressed in. You can't change it. So I do have another carb that seat is wore right out on, and I'm having trouble keeping it sealed. So you just slide this pin in. And then this screw is beveled so that it holds down that pin. Again, I just snug it down. So how this works is fuel comes into this bowl, and as the fuel rises, it moves this float up, and it stops fuel from coming in the needle. And this is your main fuel supply here. So when it's down like that, it'll allow fuel to come in, and this will shut the fuel off. And there is a setting in the book for a manual for how to set that. I never mess with it, so it should be fine when I put it back together. And again, make sure when you put this back on, it goes back on properly. This is an air vent. It goes up in there, and make sure the gasket stays on. So again, tighten these up so that you're crisscrossing them, that you're not tightening one up and end up cracking the bowl. Again, once I have them all snug, then I'll finish tightening them up. Then I'll put the idle screw back in, and if you remember, when I took the idle screw out, it was 1 1/4 from the bottom. So again, I'm just going to snug it down to the bottom, just so it barely touches, and I'm going to screw it out 1 1/4. So again, there's half, there's 1, and it was about there, I think. So I can adjust that once it's back onto the sled. The other thing I did is I took off the boot going into the engine. So this slides on here like this and goes into the engine. You want to check, make sure it's not cracked, that the rubber is in good shape, because if you're getting air sucked into here, you're going to suck some snow in, or you could lean out the engine and take it out. So again, just go over a couple of things here. Your choke goes in here. These are your air bleed vents from the top with the hoses. Your fuel supply comes in here, and this is your oil line coming in. So I'm going to hook all those back up in the sled, and once I get the carb all back in there, I'll show everybody once we're running. Thank you. So when you slide the carb back in the boot, make sure you tighten up the clamps back up good and snug, that they're not gonna get any air through them. And then first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hook back up my choke cable. Again, slide it in there. Get it started good. Don't cross thread the nut going in. And I'm just gonna finger tighten this down, and then I'll grab a 14 wrench, metric wrench, and there we go there. And I'll just snug it down good with the wrench. And then we have to hook up our oil line here. So again, just pull it out. Get the barrel in there and pull it around, it'll come in. And then again, snug it down. Being careful not to strip the threads again or get them cross-threaded. And I'm just going to put it where that nut touches again. And again, I'm just going to snug that nut up. I know I didn't move the nut much when I loosened it off, so I've been lucky in the past. I haven't had any issues. And the next thing I want to do is hook the throttle cable up. So same thing, get the barrel of the cable up underneath, slide it through, and again, I'm going to thread this down without moving the nut. Just get it to where it touches again, and then I just give her snug down. And so what I want to see again is a little bit of movement in that throttle. You can see that it just touches and moves a little bit. So that's wide open throttle. It can't go up anymore. And when it comes down, I do have some play in that cable. That way. So I got put a little prime actually down the spark plug just to start it, and got it all ready to go. And